Hello, my name is Scott Prati. I'm the assistant principal at Maumee High School, and this presentation is a very surface level introduction into restorative practices. I will do a follow-up presentation later on that gets more specific and more in depth. So, when we try to frame our conversation for restorative practices, we like to ask educators, will you experience or witness conflict this school year? And inevitably, the answer to that is yes. In fact, most educators would say the right question is, when will you experience or witness conflict in the school year? We all know that as part of large institutions with lots of people, that means lots of personalities, and all of that equates to large opportunity for friction and conflict between individuals. If we can accept that, then we can properly frame our minds to accept the notion of restorative practices. And that brings us to our why. Restorative practices aim at revising our thinking so that we can see conflict in the school setting as an opportunity for learning. And that opportunity allows us to help students build better relationships with their fellow students, and it allows us to help them build better relationships with their teachers. And that is a win-win. So where does restorative practices come from? A brief history of restorative practices is that these are tactics and components that have been used by ancient and indigenous cultures throughout the world for hundreds and hundreds of years. In more modern societies, they have sort of gone by the wayside, but what we are now seeing is that these restorative practices are being used more broadly in the United States prison system in an effort to reform prisoners, to repair harm, and to decrease the rates of recidivism in our prisons. The fundamental hypothesis of restorative practices is that human beings are happier, they're more cooperative and productive, and they're more likely to make positive changes in their behavior when those in positions of authority do things with them rather than to or for them. And so I want you to focus on the image on the bottom left, the two-dimensional discipline continuum. This is your more traditional discipline model, where depending on the severity of the behavior determines how far permissive or how far punitive you must be. Obviously, the further left you go, the more punitive you are and the harsher the discipline. The further right, the more permissive you are and you allow that behavior. That's the traditional model. Restorative practices operates on this newer model, which is the social discipline window to the lower right. The social discipline window takes into account two components, control and support. And those two components align to create four different quadrants. Now, it goes without saying that we want to strive with our discipline to be in the quadrant where we're doing something with these students. If the control level is too high, but support is low, you're going to be in the quadrants where you're only just doing something to the student, which is like the traditional model, or you're being neglectful and you're not doing anything at all. If control is too low, but support is too high, then again, you're either permitting the behavior or you're being neglectful of the behavior altogether. So we want to strive to be in that quadrant where we're doing something with the students. So how do we do that? Well, we use multiple different components of restorative practices. These components range from informal to formal. Your effective statements and effective questions are your most informal. Your small impromptu conference is a little bit more formal. Your group or circle is going to be more towards that formal end of the spectrum. And then, of course, your most formal component is the conference, which occurs after harm has been done. Using effective language is wonderful for handling and addressing those everyday behaviors you have in your classroom. Effective language allows the individual or the teacher to articulate how someone's behavior is affecting them or others. So it's good for addressing, the student who talks out of turn, the rude or inappropriate comments, if you witness teasing or any kind of disrespectful behavior. Effective language is wonderful, and there's specific ways to do that, which I'll get into in the next presentation. Another part of effective language is the effective questions. These are questions that are asked to somebody who causes harm that leads them to think about where their frame of mind was when they were exhibiting the behavior or when they were doing the harm. These questions are open-ended, and these questions are designed to really ramp up the accountability that an individual must endure as a result of their behavior or the harm that they have caused. So effective language is a great informal way to address behaviors and at the same time increasing the level of accountability. Restorative circles are a wonderful tool for classroom use. Any teacher can use them. It's recommended that if you use circles, that they occur at regular intervals. These are a preventative measure. And when you implement a circle, you should implement them with a protocol. And what I mean by that is there must be rules. A very simple rule for a circle is that you use a talking stick or some kind of item that the only person who is holding the item, that's the only person who can talk. And that way you avoid students talking over each other. The great thing about the circles is it gives students the opportunity to exercise their voice. And as the circles become a little bit more intimate, it also requires students to exercise responsibility. By that, I mean, a great rule for a circle is what's said in the circle should stay in the circle. Kind of give a little bit of confidentiality to your classroom. The great thing about the circles is that it allows students to develop shared understanding of each other. And they can also develop shared understanding of the teacher. By doing that, it improves relationships, it improves empathy, and overall, it enhances community. And the belief is if the community in the classroom is good, then the individual students will treat each other more respectfully. Now, these circles can be curricular or non-curricular. When you consider the non-curricular circle, you can use it to do check-ins or check-outs. You can use it to have kids do goal setting, talk about current events or hot topics, and they can even play games. Obviously, on the curricular side, they can still discuss current events. They can debate. They can do a book study or review. They can even use this for science, where they're discussing hypotheses and reviewing lab activities. Restorative conferences, these are the most formal component of restorative practices. These occur after harm has been done. And the main goal with a conference is to repair that harm. These are highly structured. They operate with protocol and scripted questions, and they involve both the offender and the victim, and sometimes even more people. And those individuals can also include what we call supporters. So the offender and the victim may bring a supporter to this conference. The main thing with a restorative conference is that they're not designed to assign blame. The offender's willingness to participate in the conference is an admission or an acceptance of blame. And so we don't need to belabor that point. What we want to do here is we want to develop shared understanding of what happened, why it happened, and how we can move forward with a reasonable solution. And that's the goal for the restorative conference. So that sums up the different components of restorative practices. As I said in my next presentation, I'm going to get more specific into the effective language and the other components and how you can implement them in your classroom effectively. Thanks for listening.